Everybody, welcome to the podcast. Day 41, 40 days left, 40 days, 40 nights. September 26th already. I know I say that every day, but I keep, when you get older, time passes faster. It's a weird thing in terms with it. So what we're going to talk about today, I promised it would be controversial. It's incredibly controversial. In my career, one of the things I do or have done is I look at futures a lot. I look at what I talk about this. Past behavior predicts future behavior. It's a big thing to look at if you want to kind of get a feel for where we're headed or what's going to be happening. I have a pretty good intuition. I hear some of that's due to the trauma of my childhood, but also I just think I have a really good intuition. It's something I pay attention to. But the intuition, as I've studied intuition, it's usually not really based on magic and woo-woo and everything. It's based on your ability to read the tea leaves based on information that's already out there in the ether. And that's how I'm approaching today. So I've mentioned it once in a past podcast. I don't think anybody heard it particularly. And if they heard it, they didn't really it didn't click because nobody caught it. But I want to talk about it in a little bit of depth today. And it's because past behavior can predict future behavior. And it has to do with kids. And it has to do with racism. And it has to do with abortion. So are you ready? I've tried really hard to map this out so you could follow my logic. And there is logic here. I don't care what anybody says. I've been trolled pretty hard lately. I don't care. I do my homework, so I'm not really worried about what I'm putting out there. But I will tell you that this is a hypothesis. This is what could happen because we have no way to know what's really going to manifest if Trump wins. Not really. He's doing a good job of telling us. I mean, it's pretty clear we're going to have racism. It's pretty clear we're going to have violence. It's pretty clear we're going to have authoritarianism, and it's going to be ugly. And people who think they're winning aren't going to be winning anymore. All of that sort of thing. That's like really basic level reasoning. And I don't want to talk to if you're like at that very basic level of reasoning, this isn't going to make any sense to you anyway. So I'm going to need you to be able to think to go with me on this journey. And if you're not capable of that, check out because I just need people who can think. You have to be able to think, folks. I need you to think. So I'm going to tell you what I'm hypothesizing, and I need you to work this through with me. So we're doing this together, okay? And here's the deal. And it's really around abortion. So that's where I started this and started to think through what's going to happen next. And we're seeing the travesties of what's going to happen next when women can't get the care they need, when a woman's actual human body is considered less important than the cells inside of it. I'm not going to talk about that right now because that's a whole different discussion. I can't believe it, but it's a whole different discussion. What I'm going to talk about is the children that are being forced to be born. So if you look at Project 2025, and if you believe our past behavior can predict future behavior, and that's like a thing, that's just true. Unless you're actively working to change your future behavior, you're typically going to do the thing you've always done. But that's why we want you to always be working on bettering yourself because there's no reason to keep doing the things you've always done if you're doing that unconsciously. Let's do it unconsciously. So the anti-abortion movement, in my belief, has always had a hidden agenda. Cannot tell me a bunch of white men have a bunch of big feelings about this. I just don't believe it's true. I don't think this is something they think about. They've figured out abortion has always been a lever to manipulate voters. And if you go watch, I think it's the Jerry Falwell documentary. But if you watch it, I'm pretty sure that was it. But it shows you how the white men came together, the white men that had an agenda, and the agenda wasn't about democracy. Their agenda was about them, and their power comes from religion as well. Religion's really good at holding up the patriarchy, right? Like the religion, nothing can hold up the patriarchy like religion. So if you look at these guys, they got together and figured out, abortion will move people because it's emotional. A lot of people really vote with their heart on abortion because the notion for some people, the very simplistic reasoning, is you're killing a baby, a gift from God. And I think God's smarter than that, but that's me. I absolutely think God's smarter than that. God's like, no, gave you free will. You got to use your judgment. I didn't put you on earth to be a jackass. You need to be a smart person on earth. Anyway, okay, so I believe there's been a darker hidden agenda. And here, I'll get to it. And it has a really dark, twisted purpose. Forced birth. You might think it's to hold women down, but I actually think that's not going to be what happens. I think that's some of what's going to happen, but that's going to be a particular kind of woman. I think there's also something else going on. In fact, if you align that with the white supremacy and the patriarchy that fuels their fevered dream about an obedient, complacent citizenry that has given its collective power to the white men in leadership, this will make sense. The whole notion of Project 2025, when you go really meta, super macro big picture, right? The whole point of 2025 is to remove decision making from yourself. You don't need to worry about that anymore. We're going to do the decision making for you, which is kind of antithetical to being a Republican. But the notion is the men will do it for you, not necessarily the government. It'll be the men who have the power in the government. So here's the deal. And I'm just saying government weird because what the hell? Got something to do. A little improv coming out. So what I'm going to suggest is really messed up. And I don't believe most people agree with this or want this to happen. I don't think this is something everybody wants. But I do believe there are some people who do want this to happen. And I do believe they're the white Christian nationalists who are trying to take over our government. Okay, so look, here's the number one thing I think this could happen, by the way, is because there's one person who would absolutely positively manifest this, and that's Stephen Miller. He's not gone, people. He's very active, involved in Project 2025 and behind the scenes with Trump. All right, so here we go. Here's how it's good. I'm going to take you through the steps. I'm going to take you through the slides. And I put it all up here on the slide, but let me take you through the steps. Imagine we have a Venn diagram, you know, the two circles. And in one circle is all the children that were forced to be born. So we don't know if they have a future. Nothing. All I know is I didn't want this baby, and that baby lands in this circle. Then there's another circle, and that's all the people who still think slavery in some shape, manner, or form is not unreasonable. Why wouldn't humans be put on earth to serve other humans? They serve me at the restaurant. They serve me at the hotel. Why couldn't it be that there are humans that could serve me that are younger than me? All right. So here we go. Women are forced to give birth without consent. Those two Venn diagrams, the overlap, Jen, focus. The overlap of the two Venn diagrams are the children that are not wanted and the people who want them. That's all you need to know. Here's what it means. Women are forced to give birth without their consent. That is already true in 20 states and more on the way. I was going to try to get the exact number, but I know right now it's 20 states. In 20 states, women are forced to give birth without consent. I'm just going to have you put the back of your mind. I want you to think about who most of those women are. They mean they cannot leave the state to go get taken care of. So they're probably, just by doing the math of economics, poor or people of color. Okay, those are those women forced to give birth without consent. Children born to the men and women who don't want them are unwanted children. So there's just a bunch of children born to men and women. We never talk about men, by the way. Men are never in this conversation. They're the ones out spreading the seed far and wide, but they're never in this conversation. This is always on women, which is part of the injustice of this whole anti-abortion movement, but fine. All right, so the children are then put up for adoption. Now, I'm going to keep reminding you who these children are. The white children are adopted because white children are coveted. White people will go to Russia and get babies. White people will do all kinds of crazy things to get white babies. You could dispute me, but oh, for crap's sake, just open your eyes. Okay, so, but who's not adopted right away? Children of color. And they're deemed by the white Christian national men who are running the show at this point to be less valuable. That's true. We do it right now. We currently deem some human beings to be less valuable. It's done by the Insurance Association. It's also done for lawsuits. If somebody dies in a corporate related death, that person's assigned a value. So we already know how to turn humans into money. That's like a thing that's very American. It's done in business all the time. A value is ascribed to you. God forbid you have a BMI like me. I am not valuable because of my BMI. Just ask any insurance company, right? We do this. This is how capitalism works. Okay. At the same time, you have this other problem, which is these less valuable children cannot be a burden and create a welfare state. Oh my God. I'm not paying for those children. Are you? You want your taxes going to those less valuable children? Those children of color? Holy crap. That is not a good use of my tax dollars, they say, right? So now you have The government doesn't want responsibility for those children. That's not what they're doing here. They have not said, by the way, when you have to have your forced birth, there is not one damn thing the governors who made the forced birth abortion rules are doing for the forced births. They're not covering their health care. They're not covering childcare. They're not covering food and expenses for the first year, their college education. They're not covering housing, warmth, clothing, anything. The nutrition of the mother who's breastfeeding, if we're lucky. They're not covering a damn bit of that right now today. So past behavior predicts future behavior. You already know Republican governors give no shits about these children. They have done nothing for these women who are in trauma. Okay, having a forced birth. So now we know that the less valuable children can't belong to the state. That's not going to work. We're not paying for them. So then what happens? They get handed over to adoption agencies. And under Project 2025, those adoption agencies are corporate-owned adoption agencies, just like healthcare, insurance, just like everything. Prisons. I think that's a great thing to look at it. This is like prison. We just take the little kids and we give them to the adoption agencies, and they're responsible for doing something with them. But the state's not going to pay the bill at the adoption agency. The adoption agency then is going to be highly motivated to monetize that child. I just said the ugliest sentence in the world, monetize a child. But that's it. That's what they're going to have to do, because we're going to have too many forced babies, and those babies are not going to be valued. And so we need to monetize them. And so what you'll see is we're going to remove all oversight. Sorry, that's another really important part of this. Oversight's removed in Project 2025. They don't want anybody to know the truth. That's transparency is gone. That is democratic value. It's critical for our democracy to have transparency. That's why we say Project 2025 is not based on a democracy. It's based on authoritarianism. But if you imagine now, we've got to get those babies out of here. I'm an adoption agency. I'm a private business. I'm running for profit. So I've got to show profitability. So I've got to monetize these children. What am I going to do? I'm going to sell them in some convoluted language that doesn't say selling. Lease them. I'm not sure, but I'm going to make sure that they are farmed out to people who will pay me for them. With me? Are you with me now? A child, maybe a 4-year-old, 3-year-old. We got a problem right at birth. That's a problem, because they're going to cost a little bit of money at the beginning. I hate to say it, but they are, because a baby just doesn't do things. But after we get them out of their warehoused toddlerhood, they can begin moving into homes and making differences and starting to help. They become what I call an indentured servant. And we begin the indentured servant pipeline, because you've already seen, as the less valuable children monetized based on their age as their household servants, maybe at a younger age, because, in their poor countries, that's what they were born to do. That's what they know. Those poor children of color, we had no business bringing them to America. I don't know why they thought they would ever be Americans, because they're from poor countries and they're still working in the household. That's how they feel needed. That's how they feel good about themselves, is by waiting on me, a superior white woman who couldn't possibly go fetch my own iced tea right now. It's just hard. But guess what? A little older, they become much more profitable, these kids. In fact, they're so profitable that the state of Arkansas has lowered the age at which children can be working in private sector. And they've also made sure the hours are no longer regulated, so that the kids can work in the middle of the night, in the morning. They can go work a line. They can go clean Boar's Head Deli, where listeria is rampant, just being a floor sweeper. A 14-year-old monetized child would be a really good floor sweeper. Plus, then the person who's paying the care and feeding of the child, because they're indentured servant, right? So I'm housing them, feeding them. They bring home a paycheck for me. Now I'm getting some value. This is better than owning rental property, don't you know? I'm going to get me a slew of kids, and I'm going to farm them out, and they're going to make money for me. And this is great, because that's what they were born to do. That was what they were meant to do. Just look at the color of their skin. They don't have intelligence. Yeah, they're colored. Do you get it yet? This is the birth to servant pipeline. All right. You're going to tell me all of this couldn't possibly happen. And the first thing that has to happen is Trump has to run. but I'm going to tell you it's lined up to happen. Now, here we go. Let me tell you why I think this could happen and what's the past behavior that's predicting this future behavior. The first thing is they killed Roe v. Wade. So when the Dobbs decision came out in 2022, it stripped away federal protection for abortion rights. And in this case, we have 30 states that have passed or proposed laws to severely limit or outright ban abortion. So we've set the stage, right? Forced birth. And we know they want that to be a federal law. Right now it's state's law. And Trump can keep saying, we all want state's laws. And I don't know what the hell he's talking about, just more of his bullshit. That's not true, simply not true. Women didn't want anybody making decisions about our bodies but us. But more importantly, we know that when Trump wins, they want to federalize anti-abortion. So forced birth becomes a national concern. So that's the first thing to tell me. The past behavior predicts future behavior. They don't care. They want these children for a reason. Second, they wrote the Project 2025 mandate, right? This giant beast, this tome, it is nearly 1,000 pages of restructuring the federal government by reducing the reach of federal oversight and going back to giving power to the states, which is just nuts. 50 states, half of whom have governors who've clearly lost their damn minds. Looking at you, North Carolina, with your guy running. I mean, we've got carpetbaggers everywhere. Montana, Ohio. What are we even doing with these idiots that the Republicans are running that are just empty shirts who are part of this elitist view of the world, this white Christian nationalist view? But y'all, please don't vote for them. Please go campaign for the Democrats who are running against them. Please just go do something, please. It's time. We've got to fight this battle. Okay, and if for nothing else, for the kids. All right, so they wrote Project 2025. Here's what 2025 does that's going to make this, that creates the opportunity for this to happen. Okay, that's what you need to think about. It weakens oversight and regulation. So it could weaken, it's planning to weaken protections for children, but it could weaken it specifically in adoption and foster care systems where states already vary in quality. In fact, the southern states, the worst ones, the ones with the Republican governors, have some of the worst records when it comes to child protection services. So when we lose federal standards because they throw them out, you leave it up to the states. And if the states want this to manifest, they're not going to have regulations that keep this from happening. No, they're actually going to play that game where they manage to do everything like Sarah Huckabee Sanders are doing right now by making kids in labor the new sexy thing. They also believe in Project 2025. We're still on that one, that past behavior, future behavior. Project 2025 focuses on privatization and outsourcing. That's the whole message in Project 2025. Cut federal government, privatize everything. It's going to be like you trying to get your teeth, your feet, your eyes, and your body fixed all at the same time. Can't happen. Why? We've privatized everything. We've managed to silo your body. Your teeth are one silo, your eyeballs are a different silo. If you have a diatrist, that's a different silo. God forbid you actually need a specialist for anything in your body, then you got to go through your medical concierge. Some people call them a general doctor. I yesterday called mine a concierge. I said, look, you can't do anything I need you to do for me. You've got to farm it all out because that's what they've done now. And she said, you're right. I'm so sorry for you. You went to school for 100 years and now you're my concierge. All right. And then we have another thing Project 2025 does is it actually codifies, makes into code, makes into policy, marginalizing communities at greater risk. So you know who's lesser? Donald Trump told you in 2016, 2015, after he came down the escalator and he met a reporter that had a physical disability. What did Trump do? He had to imitate him. And that's like, we see it. It's disgusting. But Trump says, he doesn't like soldiers that got caught. If you're weak, if you're not seen as being alpha, you're less than, and you will be monetized because you need to serve the state one way or the other. You either produce for the state and you can control it, or you produce for the state and you can't control it. But that's what 2025 is heading to. Marginalized communities at greater risk, especially non-white children who are already overrepresented. Non-white children are overrepresented right now in foster care and adoption systems. I just heard a gay legislator talk about how the gay couples are constantly asked to take the kids nobody wants. And they do, because gay people are wonderful human beings. but you white people who, I'd say that like I'm being an ass right now, but what I mean is it's really easy to think that it's not the people around us, but it is. And then, of course, Project 2025 is going to put this emphasis on traditional family structures, air quotes, everybody. And this puts a big value on traditional families, which could inadvertently pressure vulnerable women, particularly those from low income or marginalized backgrounds, to carry pregnancies to term without adequate support. So the thing is with those traditional structures is that this is how child trafficking would be easily not seen. Because there's other things happening in Project 2025 I didn't even go into, but they're going to pull back on education. They want the voucher system. Vouchers are not regulated, nor are they audited. And if you're using a voucher system for school, you can go to school anywhere you want. And if you are an indentured servant, you don't have to be in school because there's the owner of the child could say they're homeschooled. That's probably how they'll set it up. It's just say, oh, kids who are indentured servants have this criteria. The criteria will be some policy in the law that says kids are exposed to education. And yeah, they put on Blue's Clues once a day. Blue's Clues isn't still on, is it? They put on Blue's Clues once a day, and that's education. That's Sesame Street. Now that's too woke. It would be, there's probably that Davy and Goliath thing and those Veggie Tales. And supposedly there's 2 turtles out there now who are really bad. So if you're a parent, beware of those 2 turtles. They have, I guess they look nice on the outside, but on the inside, much like Mike Johnson, just a mess. All right, so that's Project 2025, right? So we've got 2 things now that show that this could happen. One is they already canceled Roe, and number 2, Project 2025 like just lays out the roadmap. It's so handled. So then all the guardrails removed, right? Oversight, audit trails, all that stuff's all gone. So then the thing I'm going to tell you, past behavior, future behavior. Now just sit back and relax because I'm going to tell you some ugly stuff. We've nearly done this before in the United States. Actually, we've had many versions of this. Let me just share a few stories that have happened in our American history, much to our collective shame as far as I am concerned. We have exploited and abused adoption and foster care. That's something we have done. The orphan train movement in 1854, this went on for, it looks like 80 years. For 80 years, there was something called the orphan train movement. And this movement relocated about 250,000 kids, 250,000 children from urban areas. Urban, that's code. What does urban mean? From urban areas to rural families. We moved kids in the orphan train movement from urban areas to rural families. While some children found stable homes, many were exploited as cheap labor, and there was little oversight to ensure their welfare. So yeah, you got a crisis in labor, and you don't want to hire immigrants because you can use the children. I should think of agriculture because it's one of the things we do in Santa Cruz County is agriculture is a big thing. And I know migrant workers now have their kids out there, which is, it's hard. But in California, the kids aren't supposed to be out there, they're supposed to be in school. They actually try to pull them into school for a while. So my daughter, and I did too, growing up, I went to school with migrant worker children. Like they were cool. It kind of expanded my world. Anyway, so there's a lack of regulation. So we did this with the orphan train movement for 80 years, 1854 to 1929. Holy crap, didn't have oversight. Kids were absolutely used this, exploited cheap labor. And I love that urban, like signal, little one of those dog whistles, right? And then there was the Georgia Tan, she was a woman, and the Tennessee Children's Home Society. This is 1924 to 1950. So for 25 years, Georgia Tan trafficked them under the guise of running an adoption agency. She exploited. You're going to be surprised who she exploited. This is going to surprise you. And non-white children and sold them to wealthy families without proper legal processes. Her operation revealed how vulnerable children can be when the adoption system lacks oversight and transparency. Guys, we know this right now. We have child trafficking right now. And if you don't know the symbol, you know where you put your thumb in your palm and you roll all 4 fingers down. If you see somebody do that, the 4 fingers come out over the thumb, that means somebody needs help. That's the universal sign. Go Google it. It's the sign that means help me, I'm being trafficked. they say that sentence, but it means everybody should know it. Thumb rolled into your palm, fingers down. It means help me. So go get a cop, be brave, kick someone's ass, peel the girl off, whatever you got to do, but that means they need help. Okay, let's talk about human trafficking in the United States. Oh, gee, Jen, you're already talking about it. Foster care and trafficking is at an elevated risk. Anybody in the U.S. foster care system is at an elevated risk for trafficking today, right now, with regulations, with transparency, with theoretical audit trails. Kids today are being trafficked. The National Foster Youth Institute reports that 60% of child trafficking victims have spent time in foster care. Guys, 60%. That's 6 out of 10 kids have been trafficked as part of foster care. The instability and lack of oversight in the foster care system create vulnerabilities that traffickers can exploit. People are overworked. We don't spend our money there. If we really cared about kids, it's not anti-abortion we should be fighting for. It's fighting for the kids that don't have parents. That's the fight we should be having right now. They're born. They're not cells. They're whole integrated humans that are breathing and have a heartbeat. So yeah, these are born people. And then we have labor trafficking in agriculture, which is what I was just talking about. Historically and in modern times, marginalized communities, we're not going to use the dog whistle there. We're going to say they're already marginalized, including children, been trafficked for labor in agricultural settings. This, of course, makes a ton of sense because you can take the child. The child doesn't have any agency, has no way of getting away. You can take the child and keep moving them, and the child just can't escape. The child is just screwed. They have no one. They have nothing. And they only have the frame of reference they have from what they know. So they might intuitively thinking, this is awful. This can't be what living is. But what would they know? They have nothing compared to except for maybe the people they work for, but they have a station. So when you inculcate someone to the extent at which they believe everything you're telling them, then it becomes their reality. And children, of course, for kids, this is the greatest vulnerability, right? This is their reality. It's why children of alcoholics, they have their reality. Like we all know about pathology. Okay. I don't even talk about what happens when all these pathological adults. I don't know what happens to all these additional servants as adults. I didn't even go there. I can't go that much into the future because I just freak out. So we have already 2 things that have happened. Here's another one. We have government-backed displacement of marginalized communities. So the government has actually moved people based on being a marginal community on the margins. We had the Native American boarding schools of the 1870s and 60s, all the way to 1960. That sucker lasted 90 years. Native American children were forcibly removed from their families and placed in government-run or religious boarding schools where they suffered abuse, forced labor, cultural erasure, and oh my God, death. Schools operated with little oversight, allowing for widespread exploitation. That was for the Native American people who, by the way, we're their company. We came, they were already here, and we went and took their children away from them. We took their children away from them. And then we had the forced sterilization movement, which is interesting because, anti-abortion, but forced sterilization in the early 20th century, that's the 1900s, tens of thousands of women, many of them, wait a minute, because you're going to see there's a trend for disabled or women of color were forcibly sterilized under eugenics programs. Can I get a Heil Hitler? Yeah, these programs backed by state governments targeted vulnerable communities and demonstrated the dangers of inadequate protections for marginalized groups. Guys, as late as last century. And it was in the Native American boarding schools that went all the way up to the 1960s. Forced sterilizations earlier in the 20th century, but it happened, and it happened because white men were looking out for, let me get it again, hang on. White men were looking out for the best interests of the poor, disabled, and women of color. That's what they were doing. Because, they really want to make sure that they're safe. And then the last thing, oh God, there's 2 more horrible things we did. We had the exploitation of Black children under slavery and Jim Crow. Black children were routinely exploited for labor. By the way, now we're talking about white Christian nationalists, right? These are white supremacists. These are the people in the Klan whose daddies were in the Klan, like Trump. These people were raised with the Klan mentality, and they somehow managed to tie it into Jesus and somehow think Jesus was all about racism, and they love it. So what they did is they think this sounds so familiar to them. Because didn't you know, when we had slavery, the Black kids, the families were intact. It was such a nice thing. The mom, the dad, the children, they were all my slaves. They had families. It's a traditional family. Okay, they got beat and raped, and the children were, tortured and all that. But it was really, it's the only thing they knew, right? This is all they knew. I'm sorry, being an ass, because I cannot believe how bad we are to each other. Legal systems during the time of children under slavery did little to protect Black children, creating a legacy of vulnerability that persists in some forms today. So we still have some of the old-fashioned BS going on. And if you don't believe me, I want you to look at the death of innocent Black men in the South. Usually death by cop, but it's all kinds of people that are helping Black people, with their lives by killing. Finally, we have adoption of Indigenous children in the 1950s through the 1970s. During this period, Native American children were removed from their homes and not taken to schools, but this time placed with non-Native families without proper legal process or oversight. So it was called, this practice known as the Indian Adoption Project. Even Americans didn't ask for this. This was white people solving problems that didn't exist, was intended to assimilate. That was the threat, right? The Native American kids needed to be assimilated. And so they were left led to culture, erasure, and abuse. And it wasn't until the Indian Child Welfare Act of, get this, it was just 1978 that the process was stopped. Guys, 1978. I'm like a real human at 1978. I'm still in high school, but still, that's not very long ago, not in terms of history. That's not long. And that's why I'm telling you this can really happen. So, okay, the historical examples show that our past behavior shows that white men are capable of it, because I don't think there's a lot of women associated with that, because we didn't have a lot of women leaders. So I'm going to tell you white men are capable. These are the white men in power, and they are capable of these behaviors in our history. But more importantly, and here's the fourth slide, and the reason why I think this is more dangerous than ever before. And the fourth point is Trump and Miller have done it before. I don't know what else to tell you. It's literally happened. Family separation policy in 2018 placed children in detention centers with inadequate oversight and care, leading to reports of overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, and severe psychological trauma. Children were too young to understand the separation, and parents were deported without their children. Oh, if the parents are deported without their children, then we have orphans and orphans ties. Are you with? Think like Stephen Miller. You're going to need to get your super uber creep on. Super creep. And then poor conditions in the detention centers themselves. The children were held for extended periods and didn't have clean clothes, hygiene products. They suffered from neglect, illness, trauma, and there were incidents of trafficking and exploitation. One of the things we do know is sexual exploitation is massive when there is no oversight. So on top of everything else, not only will these kids be trafficked as slaves, but sexual assault comes with it. It's like the sprinkles of the cake, right? How could you just have a cake of indentured servitude, add the sprinkles of sexual assault in there, and then you really got something. We have human trafficking vulnerability when Trump and Stephen Miller were in. One of the things that happened is that when the kids went off to foster care, they didn't know where they went. And Bessie's boss's name is attached to all this, mostly because her family helped pay for the foster care agencies. Now, that was an investment, so I'm not sure she had direct oversight. She invested in these foster care agencies that then went on to traffic the kids. So I'm going to say that's an endorsement from the GOP, because she put the money in to make it happen. And then, of course, we had the long-term psychological impact on these kids, which we're not going to know. We're just not going to know right away how the trauma we inflicted on these children during the separation, crap that happened during the Trump administration. We're really not going to know the long-term effects. We know some of what happened to the adults, and it was devastating for the parents. There's a lot of trauma on Twitter right now. It seems like we have maybe just people are talking about it. The kids are killing themselves. I mean, 20-year-olds, kids that are older. They're just bummed and it's bleak. And so, there's so many parents that care about their kids so much. And I know the trauma, I don't know the trauma personally. I know what kind of trauma these parents are facing with the loss of a child. Do you imagine somebody ripping your child away from you, taking your child, and you couldn't get it back? It's the worst thing. And we did that. We did that on purpose with intention. So I'm telling you, our past behavior predicts this future behavior. So I want you to, I know this is dark. I know this is something that most people don't want to think about, but we owe it to ourselves to think about it because the signs are all there. All the signs are there. And nobody's going to come out and talk about this because, of course, it's not talked about, but it's done. And that's maybe the most important part of this whole talk I'm giving is that it's been done over and over and over. And it's always dealing with the same perceived problem: the poor, the disabled, and people of color. Anyone the alphas think is less than. That's who's most vulnerable. All right, so you need to vote this year. You need to vote right now. This is why all of us are telling you, please vote down ballot. Because a vote for Kamala is fantastic, but it's not enough. She needs soldiers. She needs Democrats all the way down the line to back her up, because the only way we're going to start to manifest change, because we're sick. If you look at this, there's a sickness in this country, and that sounds like a lunatic, don't it? It's kind of weird. But there is something sick about this, that mandate, that huge tome on Project 2025, that these men felt so confident. I guess that's the sick part. That there's a group of people, the Heritage Foundation and the Federalists, who feel so comfortable and so righteous and so right that they're willing to put 2025 out there in print. Now, they've pulled back like crazy. In fact, I found this great quote from Slate. Of all Trump's recent lies, his attempted dissociation with Project 2025, his attempted, may be the most important, because he's trying to convince the American people that the choice between dictatorship and democracy is not what they face at all. What happened when they published 2025 is it really became clear for anybody who can read that the plan here is diabolical. It is to effectively remove agency from most Americans and give it to few. So we need to vote not just for our children and for the future of our children, for the future of our country, but we need to vote because these men need to be put out of our misery. I want you to take a look at all this history. I put it all in the blog. It's all here. So if you need to look at it in writing, listen to me talk, that's great. But I need you to really think this through. And it's okay if you don't believe it, but I want you to come back to all the evidence that I've provided that shows past behavior is really possibly a predictor of future behavior. All right, with that, I'll stop because this makes me really uncomfortable and pretty nauseous. And it's hard to talk about, but I want to do it. I want to do it now kind of early so we can take a look at it and how people start to discuss it. Thank you for listening. I'll be back tomorrow.